Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with Jim Johnson.
So my name is Jim Johnson. I am the Star Trek Adventures project manager. I've been doing that for a couple of years now. I've been a freelance writer on the game from the very beginning, and just in charge of the line now creatively, and just looking forward to chatting with you all today.
We're here to talk about the Shackleton Expanse. It has a whole bunch of new material, like never seen in any other Star Trek media. Like it's a whole new section of the galaxy, new Starbase. Starbase 364, it's very different from other Starbases, not Deep Space Nine or anything like that, because it's a combination of Federation and Klingon technology and architecture. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. So Scott and Dayton, they put a little bit of detail in their broad outline, but not a lot. And the concept was, it looks like a Federation starbase, so it's got kind of the same kind of mushroom in space kind of look and feel that Space Dock and a lot of the TNG era starbases have. But they didn't really go into a lot of detail, and unfortunately, by virtue of the way we were writing the adventures, none of the adventures that we released for the Living campaign really had the space, the word count to really focus on the station itself. So we were mostly out in the expanse doing things on planets and in space and whatnot. And so I always knew that I wanted to give the players and the game masters an opportunity to get here's some information about the station, because that was the idea was that would be their home base. That would be your hub of operations. And then you'd be out doing stuff, right? But it wasn't really until the beta book. I think we put a little bit of information in the beta quadrant book about the station, to go into a little bit more detail, but it still wasn't a lot. But so with the Shackleton book, of course, we're able to put more information in there. And the idea that we kind of came up with is that the Federation, the Federation and the Klingons worked together to make the station. And the idea is that the Federation used the external shell of a Federation station. So it looks Federation on the outside, but the Klingons had the primary responsibility to design the interior. So all the interior spaces, all the different levels, operations, the Galleria, engineering, etc., were supposed to theoretically be kind of have a Klingon aesthetic. And then the other thing I added in is once I started writing the section on the space station itself in the book, I was like, okay, so we got this Galleria, which was very clearly inspired by the promenade on DS9. I was like, what if you got this massive? And I was also thinking about super malls. I guess in the 80s and 90s, you would have 4 or 5 level gigantic super shopping malls, right? And they would just be levels and levels and terraces and all kinds of stuff, and sunlights and everything. And I was like, what if there was just this huge gigantic level of multi-levels, and all the bulkheads in that level were modular and could be moved around? So as you have all these different alien species coming to the station and going, oh, we're going to set up shop here because it's a crossroads now, they could actually discover that all the bulkheads could move, and all of a sudden this Galleria just becomes this huge gigantic hodgepodge of different species and aliens and all kinds of weird stuff. So visually in my head, it's oh, this would be just amazingly cool to see on screen. And to be honest with you, we just didn't have the space in the book to do a lot of art for that. But I tried to paint it in words, of course, because as a writer, you got to try to do that. But yeah. So anyway, in long answer to your question, is Federation on the outside, Klingon on the inside, but then Klingon plus a whole bunch of alien species as they come to live at the station.
And you mentioned before that any era of Star Trek can be used for this setting.
Yeah.
And I assume also that the Klingon core book would be also perfect for this as well.
Yeah. So and this was part of that 5-year mission, I guess, the way you're talking about it. 5 years ago, we didn't even have a concept in our head of doing a Klingon core book. I think kind of in the I think maybe on our chat conversations we maybe joked about the Klingon curse, right? How both Decipher and Last Unicorn Games wanted to do a Klingon book, announced doing Klingon books, and then for one reason or another they weren't able to do it, right? Decipher folded, and I think Wizards of the Coast bought Last Unicorn Games. I don't remember the details now, but whatever the case, those just couldn't happen, right? So I think it wasn't until 2018-ish when we were like, yeah, well, you know what, we should do a Klingon core book. And then once that happened, as we were developing the Klingon core rule book, that was when the Living campaign was on hiatus, kind of because we had finished the first season and we were trying to figure out how to reimagine it, because we knew we couldn't go back to the regular adventure releases plus a survey, because it was just we didn't have the bodies to commit to it, or the bandwidth to make it work the way we wanted it to. So somewhere in there, I thought it just dawned on me that, what, we got the Starfleet core rule book. We're going to have a Klingon core rule book. We were also developing the Tricorder collector's edition set, and that's a redress of the core rule book itself, right? So I knew, like, okay, we're going to have 3 core products available to fans. You don't need to buy them all, of course. You pick the one that you want. And I was like, we have so many avenues coming into the game now. Wouldn't it be cool if the Shackleton product, and at the time we were thinking about it being either a book or a box set or something. We didn't know exactly what the final form, factor would be. But I thought, wouldn't it be super cool if the Shackleton book could kind of be like whatever avenue you come into the game, they could all lead to Shackleton, right? They could all lead to the Expanse. And I kind of held on to that, and that's what we went with. So when we were developing the Klingon core rule book, I specifically told, I think Fred Love wrote the adventure in the Klingon core book. I said, Fred, do whatever you want with this introductory adventure, but at the end of it, make sure you're pointing them toward the Shackleton Expanse, just in case a crew of Klingon warriors decide they want to go do something new for, gathering honor and glory. They could go to the Shackleton Expanse because it's just wide open for whatever you want to do. And that kind of, so that tied in the Klingon book and the Starfleet core rule book, the introductory adventure in there. Already, I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked at it in a while, but I'm pretty sure that already aims people toward the Shackleton Expanse too, because at the time, the Shackleton Expanse, that was part of the Living campaign. And so that opening adventure kind of like directs new players toward the station, toward Narendra station. So then I knew, okay, now I've got 2 very clear avenues directly into the Shackleton book. This is perfect, because now, if a new game master is checking out Star Trek Adventures and he says, oh, I want to play this, but what do I need to play? And, to be able to tell them, okay, you need a core rule book. Are you going to play a Klingon focused game or a Starfleet focused game? Pick the core book that you want, or, even if you're going to do an original series, maybe you're a hardcore original series fan, you can go grab the Tricorder set because that's got a core book in it. So no matter which avenue you decide to take, you grab one core book of whichever you need, and then Shackleton, and literally everything else in the line is supplemental, right? It's nice to have, but none of it's required, because we didn't sprinkle important rules throughout all the books. They're just, you got more species, you got more information, you got more talents, you get more stuff you can play with. But like the essential stuff is in the core. And then if you want this campaign setting, you get Shackleton, you've got years and years and years and years and years of gaming stuff at your hand in 2 books, and you're done, right? You don't have to buy thousands of splat books and supplements and whatever, right? You can just, like, literally these 2 books is all you need for just bringing Star Trek to your table forever. Really, honestly, because there's so much you can do with it. But yeah, so I was really, really intentional about making sure that all the content in Shackleton could be adapted for any era of Star Trek, and could be adapted for use as either a Starfleet crew or a Klingon crew. And I'll be honest with you, because we have and this, I don't mean for this to be a shameless plug, but it's what it's going to sound like. Because I was also starting to develop the player's guide and the game master guide early this year, as I was doing the layout for Shackleton, I took the opportunity to tweak a little bit of the text here and there, because I know that the player's guide is going to provide a ton of new player options for those people who want to play characters in the Star Trek universe, but are not Starfleet or Klingons, right? So if you want to play independent mercenaries, or you want to play independent traders, or you want to play like any of the characters that you've seen on the show, like Kira is a Bajoran militia officer. Odo is a constable, but he's not Starfleet. He's like a non, whatever alignment he is, or not alignment, but whatever polity he aligns himself with. So you could even take Shackleton. You could create a crew of mercenaries, or you could create a crew of independent traders. You could create a crew of, I don't know, some random species troubleshooters that are exploring space for some reason, and you could drop them right into Shackleton too, and it's not going to hurt the content, right? Because the campaign that we have in there, of course, was written to be accomplished by a Starfleet crew or a Klingon crew. But I mean, honestly, the more I think about it, you could have any crew getting into trouble with that. But the fun part there, then, of course, is if a crew that doesn't have the resources of the Federation or the Klingon Empire behind them suddenly gets into this huge meta plot, like, what do they do? Right? That's going to just ratchet up the tension even more. Because, like, if you think about like the crew of the Serenia, right, from Star Trek Picard, you got all these ex-Starfleeters, and you got a civilian doctor, and you got the Romulan elf, not Elrond. I forgot his name. But yeah, you got this, and the ex-Borg. You got the XB in there too. You got Seven and whatever. So you got this crazy hodgepodge of characters, kind of misfits, kind of getting into trouble, and then so you take that group, and then all of a sudden they're getting into the meta plot, and that just changes the whole dynamic of everything. But still, all that stuff in the Shackleton book, I think, would still work, because you could visit the station and meet all the NPCs, and you could get into all the stuff going on with the new species. And I think it would work. And in fact, I would love to see a group of players, and I would love to see some group online take all this content and run a non-Starfleet, non-Klingon group through Shackleton, and just to see what would happen. And I can't even imagine.
You have new factions and life paths that I don't think I've seen anywhere else. I don't know. I mean, my lore stops after the TV shows and movies, so I know there's tons of novels. So it's all the like the Vinshari, for example. Is that totally new?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very intentional, because like I knew that we had this new region of space to play with. CBS was super accommodating. Like we created this region of the Beta Quadrant, again, way back in 2016. And they looked at that outline and they were like, okay, great. Yeah, go do whatever you want with it. Go have fun, be awesome. And I mean, right now, there's literally no other Star Trek licensee doing anything with the Shackleton Expanse. It's our own unique, corner of the galaxy right now. I would love it if a comic book series or a novel or even the TV shows were to drop in a reference to it. I think that would be amazing, because I mean, CBS owns all of it now at this point, right? But I don't know if anybody in those other licensees or in the production teams are even aware. I mean, because let's be honest, the RPG industry is pretty small compared to other big stuff, right? But they could. I mean, like I mean, Twitter is an amazing shrinker of the world, right? Like I've had interactions with a lot of people, and I've met so many great people on Twitter, and you never know who's looking. You never know who's watching.
I mean, Lower Decks.
Exactly.
Not to go off topic too much, but they have so much Easter eggs.
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes I say something, I'm like, where is that from? And I have to Google it and search for it. And they're like, oh wow, that one episode from from this, it's so you never know.
Yeah. But to your point then, when I was developing the outline for the book, I was very, very intentional about telling the writers that I got involved is that this is a new region of space. There has to be new species here, right? It's not just going to be Romulans and Klingons and Ferengi and the usual suspects that we've seen on Star Trek for 55 years now. I wanted some new stuff in here. And not only did I want new stuff in here, I wanted to make sure that we were providing some new species that players could look at and go, oh, maybe I'll play something really new and unique. And I think part of that was spurred by the fact that we had done the Gamma Quadrant book and the Delta Quadrant book right before we did the Klingon book, right? So it was fresh in my mind that, Kira, Odo, Quark, Kess, and Neelix were all very important characters for their respective series. And they were also important because they provided a non-Federation perspective to the storylines, and it made things more dynamic. And it made me think about something that Ron D. Moore said ages ago about The Next Generation, is that he really struggled to write for those characters because they were all Starfleet and there was not a lot of conflict, right? And it was really hard to write conflict among the characters. And of course, conflict is interesting. And so it was really hard to write good stories for them where they could be kind of like batting at each other's heads, because they're all copacetic and they're all one big happy fleet, and it's hard to make some drama work. So I think that's why they kind of brought in Ensign Rowe near the end of Next Gen there to try to get a little tension in there. And I think that's what made DS9 so effective, is that you had, Starfleet, but you also had the Bajorans, and then you had Odo, kind of like the man of two worlds. And so I was like, well, why not give players that option in bringing Shackleton into it? So we created 4 brand new species, completely whole cloth, brand new, never seen anywhere in Star Trek. And so we dropped those into the book, and intentionally to be, both they could be potential allies or adversaries of the player characters, but also there's that option of, like, if one of those 4 character species appealed to a player, they could work with the GM, during session 0 while they're all creating their characters and say, you know what, I really want to play Calmiran. Let's set up the pilot episode to be kind of like caretaker or emissary, where my character is not Starfleet, but encounters the Starfleet crew or the Klingon crew, and interacts, and then I join that crew. So I'm Calmiran or Vinshari or Akaru or Kofuari, but now there's that new dynamic to the game. So it's not just a Starfleet crew doing a thing; it's a Starfleet crew plus this new, unique, interesting species, which is part and parcel of Star Trek, right? I think every Star Trek series has had at least one unique character that brings a different perspective, right? So Spock was it for the original series, and you had, I guess, Data and maybe Troy to a lesser extent for Next Gen, and so on and so forth. So I really wanted to kind of hit that button, that traditional Star Trek button, that somebody has an opportunity to play a very unique character that isn't Starfleet and isn't anything else. It's just their thing, and they can bring that whole cultural element into it and create something different. So that was the intent there. So four totally brand new species plus the Orions. I know the Orions are a fan favorite, and we hadn't really gotten to them yet in the line. And I knew, over the course of several books, like doing the Alpha Quadrant book, and then the Alpha book, and then the Gamma book, I was like, I got to fit the Orions in here somewhere, and I just didn't have the page count to fit them into either one of those books. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to hold them. Somehow we're going to fit the Orions in here somewhere as a playable character species. And as I was putting the outline for the Shackleton book together, I was like, you know what, I've got, a few pages available to do something. I'm going to put the Orions in here. So that gave us one well-knonon species that we hadn't done yet in the game line, right? So that gave me an opportunity. And I wanted to actually put in a couple more, but I just ran out of, I ran, as long as the book is, right? The book is 320 pages long. I wanted to add more, but I just couldn't do it, because going any further than 320 was just way too much to ask for. So there are more playable character species coming. I just got to find the right books to put them in to make it worthwhile.
Okay. The living campaign, that deals with the Tili Cal. Now, don't want to spoil anything, but how, for those that are kind of intrigued about what this is about, how would you describe this 10-chapter adventure? Is it very actiony? Is it mysterious? Is it maybe slightly in the realm of horror? How would you describe that adventure?
Oh man, so the 10-part adventure as written, so I don't want to put any mandates on it. This isn't like you have to run it exactly as it is from beginning to end and you're done. I was very conscious of wanting to make this to be more of a sandbox setting and a toolkit, right? So I wanted to make sure I threw as many tools as possible at game masters and players so that they could go off and run their own version of the campaign and not have it feel like a canned module that they've run through and they're done, right? So the 10-part campaign, the first 2 parts are as intended, are written in the original series. So that's where the whole kind of like thing gets started, where the crew of the Lexington kind of runs into some of these weird things that are going on, and they're like, what's this weird alien species? There's an ancient alien species, but there's some weird stuff going on. What's happening? And then they explore that for a couple episodes, and then some big fireworks happen, and then the story picks up about 100 years later in the Next Gen era, and then more shenanigans happen. And then so parts 3 through 10 are all kind of intended to be in the next gen era. I mean, at least that's how we wrote it. But again, caveat, you could literally lift the entire campaign and drop it into any era you wanted to with some tweaks, right? It's not going to hurt anything really, because we didn't tie hardly any of it to a canonical event, right? We reference canon events here and there just to add some verisimilitude to it. But you can easily cut that stuff out and just do whatever you want with it. But there is the potential for, again, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about genres, and you could do horror, you could do body horror, you could do mysteries, you could do out and out war. Really, you can put a lens on any one of these adventures and tweak it to whatever, you pull the levers to whatever you want it to be. Like, I think overall it's intended to be a mystery, I think, more than anything else. I think that in the chapter that I wrote about like game mastering in the using the Shackleton Expanse and game mastering, I think mystery was the primary tone, because it's like there's weird stuff going on in the Expanse, there's all these weird spatial anomalies, there's all these weird effects that are impacting your ship and your psychic senses. What's going on? What's the story behind that? What that gives an opportunity for crews to get to the bottom of those mysteries. There's stuff happening on the station. Why are these things happening? There's some weird stuff going on that you can play with. What are these different species? What are the Vinshari up to? What are the Chimerans up to? Why are the Kofuari? Why are they doing what they're doing? So I think mystery more than anything else. And of course, that being said, mystery is really kind of the primary driver for Star Trek as a whole anyway, right? It's like almost every episode is that something's happening. You got to figure out what's happening, right? That's the classic mystery. But there's some really weird, freaky stuff in some of these adventures that, like, you could easily turn up the horror lever quite a bit, or you could get into some romance if you want to. I mean, that's some of that stuff is just, we don't intentionally write it, but it can just happen, organically, especially once a group of players and game masters get into it and make it their own, which is what really, I really tried to push that button hard in the book, was to say, look, we're giving you all these tools, but look, if there's something here you don't like, change it. You're not going to break it, just change it, make it work for you, and then go and be awesome, right? I really tried to encourage people to be creative and take it and run with it, as opposed to feeling like you've just bought a module and you have to run the module as is, and you can't get off the rails, basically. Like, there's so much open space here that you could play with, that you can do anything you want with it. But yeah, I mean, it's primarily murder mystery, but you can do anything. I mean, science fiction is great for that, because you can do literally anything you want, and it still works, especially with Star Trek, right? Because like Star Trek has done so much weird stuff, like time travel and parallel universes and pocket dimensions, and you got weird alien species like the Traveler and the Guardian of Forever, and like there's just so much weird stuff that you can drop in that and somehow it all works, right? Like, you throw some techno babble at it, you're done.
And even the tone tends to change. Like, some of them will be like Measure of the Man, which is a very very ethical, moral episode, and then you have Parallels, just straight science fiction, where Worf keeps going from parallel universe to another, and then there's some just straight horror in a way, So thank you for explaining that. But what's interesting also that I love about this book is that there's the limited campaign, but you have all these great mission briefs. Like, you have a lot of mission briefs, all these like little side adventures, so that game masters can use it to either add to the campaign or just use it separately for a new adventure of sorts.
I am I am gratified that the mission brief, like the format and the concept, is getting favorable feedback from fans. Like, I created that for the Klingon core rule book, just to kind of see how it would work, just kind of to test the waters a little bit, because by and large the mission brief format is how I prepare my missions and my adventures for my game group. Like, I'll do a high level outline of and it's the traditional kind of story idea of, like, Act 1, you get your characters up into a tree, and then Act 2, you start throwing rocks at them to see how they react, And then Act 3 is they figure it out. They either get out of the tree, or they stop the rocks, or they fall, right? Whatever happens. But for an RPG, of course, what you want to do is you want to kind of like, you want to set up the stakes, you want to set up the plot, you want to set up the story, and then you keep making things worse, right? That was one of the old writing tricks I learned, is like, when you're writing a story, make it worse, make it worse, make it worse for the character, pile on, make it harder for them, and see how they react. And for a game group, it's like, that's the best thing to do, is like just keep throwing stuff at them and then see how they get out of it, right? And like, I try not to have a preconceived notion of like how they're going to get out of it. Like, I mean, I'll have some ideas, of course, because that's just part of the whole process. But like, it's so fun as a game master to kind of like be in the moment and listen to your players, like trying to work their way through the puzzle and trying to work their way through the solution. And at the same time, I'm trying to think as fast as I can to like, okay, how can I take all their best ideas and mold that into the story and make it seem seamless. But anyway, so the mission briefs are intended to kind of like set that high level outline, so that as a game master, you can go, okay, I need the story for tonight. Here's this mission brief that focuses on the captain or the first officer or the chief medical officer, or I mean, whoever, right? And they can go, okay, here's this plot. Okay, I can tweak that to fit my campaign. And, in maybe half an hour prep time, they're off and running and they can go play and have a great time. But so each mission brief tells a complete story and provides some guidance as to like how it could end. Of course, we're not dictating how it's going to end, because that's up to the game master and the players in the moment of creating their shared experience. But yeah, so I packed as many mission briefs as I could into this book, and I think we ended up doing 36. I think there's 10 in the original series era and 26 more in the next gen era. And some of the original series ones are really meant to be original series, because some of them not tie directly, but a lot of them are related to things that happened in the original series. Like there's one that Scott wrote that I just loved, is kind of like thematically linked to the episode Galileo 7, where your crew returns to that planet to discover the giant Neanderthals have evolved a little bit. And then there's also one that he wrote that the player character ship goes to SETI Alpha 5 to rescue the Reliant crew that was stranded by Khan. And of course, the Enterprise is off dealing with stuff, and so now you're going to go pick up the pieces, and then you run into shenanigans there. So we tried to really kind of like tie canon into the campaign without like forcing you to go watch certain episodes in order to understand what's happening, right? I wanted to avoid that. But even some of the next gen mission briefs are tied to canon a little bit, or at least reference canon events, partly because in the Living campaign, the 3 Starfleet ships that we used for the playtest and then brought into the Living campaign were the Venture, the Bellerophon, and the Thunderchild. And all 3 of those ships are canonical ships that actually had stuff to do on screen, either in DS9 or First Contact, right? So I wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity to write some mission briefs to say, hey, maybe your group is using the Thunderchild. And if you are playing the Thunderchild and your campaign gets to the point in the timeline of like, oh, by the way, all this stuff is happening in the Shackleton Expanse, and now First Contact is happening, maybe the Thunderchild gets reassigned from Starbase 364, has to go to Earth to help defend Earth from the Borg, and then here's this mission brief that you can drop in while you're doing that. So I wanted to play with that a little bit. And then the last mission brief I wrote, that I wanted to add in, partly because we had an extra page and I needed to fill it, but also because it fit really nicely with Picard, is that I wanted to kind of like get at the idea of some of the Shackleton Expanse new species are aware that the Romulan sun is going to go supernova, and so this little pact of Shackleton species want to get together and go help the Romulans. So how does the Federation crew, how does the crew of player characters get involved in this? And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. So so you could extend your timeline out all the way to Picard if you wanted to, but I just wanted to try to like just drop something in there just to give more possibilities, But what's funny, and I'll finish up about the mission briefs here, is so we've got 36 mission briefs, which are each intended to be kind of an adventure in and of themselves, plus the 10 adventures, the full-length adventures that are in there. So that's 46 episodes of new Star Trek that you're getting in this book. And I did the math the other day, and I was like, oh wow, we don't even have 46 episodes of Discovery yet, right? Discovery is 3 seasons in now, and I think there's like 36 or 37 Discovery episodes. So I'm like, wow, we just dropped 3 seasons worth of stuff on you as written, right? And a smart game master could take any of the other mission briefs that we've published. I mean, we've published 40 other mission briefs between the Klingons and the mission packs, plus all the standalone adventures, right? I mean, one thing that Star Trek Adventures is not hurting for is pre-published adventures in one format or another. And so if you want to tie all that stuff in too, I mean, you've probably got, at this point, we've probably got 80 or 90 discrete missions out there for Star Trek Adventures right now. And I don't think there's anything published yet that couldn't fit somehow into this gigantic thing. Like, so if some brave soul wanted to game master like Star Trek Adventures, everything, and drop it all into the Shackleton Expanse, that would be an epic undertaking. And I would love to see it come together, because I would love to figure out how they tie everything together, like all the standalones and all the mission briefs and everything would be cool. But that's getting beyond the point of the conversation here. But yeah, it is a wealth of content, right? And to your point earlier, the vast majority of the content in this book is completely original. Like there's no, there aren't any canonical NPCs that we've included. There aren't really any canonical locations other than, indirectly referencing some stuff. Some of the ships, of course, are canonical, like I said, the Venture, the Bellerophon, and the Thunderchild are canonical. But like the vast majority of this content is completely new, and you're not going to find it anywhere else. It's not in any of the novels. It's not in the comic books. It's not in Star Trek Online. It's all just really new stuff. And that's a first for us, right? For Star Trek Adventures, because most of our products have hewn very closely to canon, or to what we see on screen, and that was intentional. Although we've been able to drop in Easter eggs to the novels and the comic books and everything else, because that's what fans want and that's what we want. And so we like to drop in those Easter eggs, and CBS is super supportive of that. As long as we're respectful of the property, and they know we are, they're happy to let us, go crazy with it and within reason. But yeah, so like if you're a game master or a player thinking about checking out the Shackleton book, be aware, and this is, I think it's a net positive, is that the vast majority of the content of this book completely original to Star Trek. And this is really a first for the Star Trek Adventures line, is that, other than the standalone adventures that we've published, like this book in and of itself is completely new ground.
And of course, there's like, as you sort of hinted, there's tons of NPCs, allies, and adversaries.
Yeah.
I think this is the first one, at least first one I know. They actually have a beast section, a section about different beasts you might see at different planets, which I thought that was very awesome. Like the Fral, if I'm saying that right, this cat creature.
Yeah.
I thought that was really awesome. And of course, you got starships and vessels, and then a great section at the end. And for those that want to create their own planets or systems in this region, they could do so, and how they could do so. Any favorite moments from what I've mentioned?
I asked the writer who wrote the beasts section, like the bestiary section. I said, just write as many as you can. Within reason, right? I didn't say, go write 1,000 of them or whatever, but they wrote, I think 25 or 30 different creatures. And I knew I didn't have the space for all of them, but I wanted to do as many as I could. I think we ended up getting like 10 or 12 into the book, because like I knew that if there's one thing that Star Trek is kind of short on, is like really interesting creatures and monsters. Monsters in a broad spectrum sense to throw at your player characters. And like I know the monster manual is a big thing for D&D, of course, right? Because you need to populate your dungeons with creatures, and that's not really a thing for Star Trek. Although honestly, Star Trek, so many episodes are the monster of the week or the alien of the week. You beam down to a planet, some weird thing's going to kill your red shirts and give you a bad day, right? So, and that's something that we haven't done a lot of in Star Trek Adventures, is provide a lot of weird and interesting creatures, other than in the standalone adventures. And the standalone adventures, I just don't have the art budget to put new art into those. Because of the scale of economy, it's just not cost effective to do a lot of original art for the standalone, so I haven't been able to do a lot of art. And I knew with the Shackleton book, I could fit a couple in. So we were able to do art for, I think, four of the 12 creatures that we included in there. And so I just took, they wrote like 30 new creatures, and I took the best 12, and totally subjective, right? Best 12, in my opinion, the best 12, but also the best 12 that created a spectrum of possibilities, like really super powerful creatures, and then like little weird, interesting, cool, kind of cute creatures that will, eat your face. But I knew that, again, new region of space, new species of playable characters, there has to be some new species of weird and interesting creatures that could be, used in stories. And then even, pulled out of the Shackleton book and dropped into some other campaign, right? I mean, there's no reason these creatures couldn't exist on a planet somewhere else. So yeah, I think that was really fun to know that we were adding more stuff to at least the game canon, if not, the official canon, because obviously the only thing that's official is what's on screen. So that was fun. Aaron Palea is one of my primary writers, and he's a super smart on science. And I was like, Aaron, I'd really like to do like 8 or 10 pages of like create your own sector, like you're exploring, almost like a hex crawl, kind of like explore as you go kind of thing. And he and I kind of went back and forth on it for a while, and we ended up with what's in the book now, of like this table heavy kind of like, with the conceit of like, you're going to a new sector of space. Sure, there's going to be thousands of planets in that sector, because like what you lose sight of is how big space is, right? Like space is really big, and even in one sector of space, there are going to be thousands of planets in that sector. But even of those thousands of planets, I mean, maybe 1 or 2 of them are going to be like interesting enough to check out, right? So that was what we were trying to get at with the kind of like the stellar cartography chapter, was like, sure, so you can create your own Shackleton Expanse, your own version of the Shackleton Expanse. You go into this new sector, you roll some dice on the tables, because of course that's fun, right? I remember doing that a ton as a new gamer coming into the hobby, was like, oh, I got tables, I can create planets, I can create alien species, I can do, I mean, just as an exercise after school, just going through the tables and writing stuff down and just imagining all these cool, crazy things that we were creating. So you come up with you roll your dice and you come up with a couple of interesting planets, and then Aaron went into like the really interesting deep detail about astronomy, of like, what's the star's class, what's the I don't even know the terms, because I'm not a scientist, and I feel like I should know them, but like the star's intensity, is it a class Y, is it a class X, whatever. So he went into some pretty hardcore, in my opinion anyway. I mean, it's probably lightweight for a scientist, but for me it was like, oh, that sounds really cool, and it sounds authentic, and it sounds Star Trek technobabbly. But so you can create your own sectors and your own planetary systems, and planets with moons and stars, and binary systems and trinary systems, et cetera, et cetera. And what that does then is that gives the game master, and even the players, that they get involved, some ownership over their version of the Shackleton Expanse, right? Because like, if you're building it yourself as you're going, that it's unique to you and your group, because like there's nobody else in the entire world who's going to create the exact same Shackleton Expanse that you are. And I thought that was the most appealing element to it. And I know that a lot of fans have kind of pushed back and said, I really wish that there was a map of the Shackleton Expanse in the book that showed me where all the planets were. And I pushed back and I said, well, I didn't want to do that. And in fact, I did not want to pin each planet into a specific region, for 2 reasons. The first reason is that, like, Star Trek as a 55-year-old property, there isn't a canonical map that tells you where everything is. The writers have been very smart to not pin themselves down, and are intentionally they're happy to change it when it suits the plot, right? So I thought, in the best tradition of Star Trek, I'm not going to pin down where these things are. I'm going to leave that up to each game master and game group to decide, put it wherever you want to put it. Put it where it best fits your needs for your story. And I didn't ever want anybody to look at the book and say, well, it says that, Akaru is in Sector 7, and it's 6 light years away from this planet, and 7 light years from this planet, and blah, 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 and warp speeds and this, that, and the other thing. Is like, no. Just put it where you want to put it. and then be consistent, or don't be consistent, because like Star Trek's not always consistent, so don't worry about it. And then the second point, now that I've lost my train of thought, so the first one was to not worry about it. Oh, it just, I didn't think it was, I wanted to make sure that every game master and player group came into it knowing that they could create their own version of the Shackleton Expanse. Like, it would be uniquely theirs, right? Here's this toolkit that we're giving you. Take the tools and make it your own. And I think I probably hit that point on the hammer too many times in the book to say, make this your own. Like, really, seriously, truly, it's a toolkit. Be creative and have fun with it. And I have to be careful too a little bit, because like I've been on social media for this game for so long now that I see, especially new gamers that are coming into the game who may not know Star Trek that well, but want to try out the game and get into it. There's a vibe of hesitance to not just go for it, right? Like they want to do it right, and they don't want to, like, they're intimidated, and I get it, right? I get that. I get being intimidated by 55 years worth of canon and fan canon and lore and beta canon. There's just so much Star Trek, right? There's thousands of novels and comic books and game material, and I mean, there's just so much Star Trek out there. Like, how do you run a game and have it feel right? And so I didn't want anybody to feel chained to what I was, or what we were telling them was true, right? I just wanted to try to make it just big enough to fit Star Trek, and then to empower players and game masters to just take it and just run with it and just be bold and do cool stuff with it, and not worry about the 55 years of stuff that's behind all of us, right? and that in some cases weighs down on us. So I don't know if I hit the target. I think I have to wait and see more reviews and more responses from the fans as it continues to get out into the market, and just see, did it work or didn't it work? And I mean, initially it sounds like it's working, but I don't know yet. So I'm really curious to hear feedback from everybody once they start getting into it and say, yeah, this is great, or no, I wish I really had more guide rails. And I get that, because new game masters sometimes they want to be in the box and they don't want to break out of it. And we're kind of like pushing them to say, no, get out of the box, go be bold and go do amazing stuff. Watch Lower Decks, watch Discovery, see how they're really stretching the boundaries of what we know about Star Trek, right? And blow the doors off of it and go have amazing fun with it.
Thank you, Jim, for taking the time to talk to us about the Shackleton Expanse. Again, I'm looking forward to trying this out with my players. Yeah, well, for our viewers out there, let us know, like, what are your favorite adventures? Have you tried this book yet? Have you tried Strange New Worlds and the other adventure source books that are out there by Modiphius? Let us know. And everyone out there, take care, get your shots, live long and prosper. Have a great day.